Okay, everybody, welcome to this two-part tutorial on how to create pixel art, or what some people refer to as 8-bit art, or others refer to as old video game art, Atari art, Nintendo art. You insert whatever makes sense to you, but this is the look that we're going for. Very simplistic, very squared off. There are no gradients. There are no real details. It's all 90 degrees. And while this might look deceptively simple, guess what? It can be. So if we set this up correctly, we shouldn't run into any problems. Here's the criteria for the project. You're going to have a minimum of, zoom into this a bit, 4 pixel icons. And what I want you to focus on is a uniform set. So if you want to do all fruit, stay with all fruit. If you want to do all people, stay with people. Superheroes, superheroes. What else did I say? If you want to do animals, great. If you want to do celebrity parodies, if you want to do video game characters or Halloween imagery, I don't care what the theme is. I just want to make sure that it stays consistent. You'll be doing 4 of them. And also, and this is important, there needs to be a minimum of 1 highlight, like you see on this banana here, and 1 shadow, like you also see on this banana here. I think this is Yoshi, I can't remember, but you can see that there are some shadows and a little bit of highlights, not much. This would be the bare minimum that I'd be looking for. I gave a few examples in our classroom, like this is a really good looking Captain America. Problem is there's no shadows and highlights. This heart, at a minimum, while it's very simple, you can see that there is 1 highlight in the upper right and 1 shadow in the lower left. Wherever your light source comes from, again, be consistent. So if the next icon here was a smiley face, you'd want the highlight on the upper right, shadow on the lower left. If the next icon was a Cupid, highlight on the upper right, shadow in the lower left, and so forth. So if we take a look again at the project, you're going to be making 4 of them. Let's take a look at the specifications and let's set this up together. And then in the next demo, I'll show you how to finish it up. So all 4 artboards are going to be in a bit different dimension. It's 72 points, not pixels and not inches. So this is something that we're not used to yet. We have a grid line at every 9 points, and we want to make sure that snap to grid is enabled. Now I've outlined these directions right here for you in your project with a step-by-step infographic. But I know that many of you like to see it done through the video, so that's what we're going to do right now. I personally think it's a good idea, and I'm not going to make it mandatory like I did last year, but I have graph paper available, and I always sketch these out before I get started because I kind of want to see what they're going to look like before I actually work into it. So as you know, I'm a big horror fan. Here's my Freddy Krueger, and it just gives me a sense of the pose, the scale, and kind of where things are. Here is my Jason Voorhees, which I've actually gotten quite far on, and I'll probably finish this one up for the demo on part 2, and that's located like right around here. And you can see that I do have some highlights on the right hand side that stays consistent and some shadows on the left hand side. So this will be one that I'll probably work back into, though I do want to finish up my Michael Myers because Halloween is right around the corner. Okay, with no further ado, let's get started. We are using Illustrator, and we will be using Illustrator for the next project as well. So if you're sick of Illustrator, you're going to have to tough it out for about another month. If you love it, well, you're in luck. Here is my Michael Myers, by the way. All right, so we're going to create a new document, and really we're going to create 4 new documents. So make sure that you got 4 artboards selected. If not, these are easy to add later on, not a big deal. But you're going to want to change whatever the default was to points. And you're going to want to make sure that the width and the height are 72. Here's the deal. Some of you might need to go a little bit beyond this, and that's okay. This will be a minimum size. The larger that you make these, the more detail that you're going to be able to imbue into your characters. So start here, and if you need to work your way up, so be it. So 72 by 72, 4 artboards. Don't worry about bleeds. That's more for Graphic Design 3. CMYK is absolutely fine, and then 300 DPI looks perfect. You're ready to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create, and I should see 4 squares here. Now the magic comes in how we set up our grids, which not too many people use grids. Let me show you where they are. You'll want to go to View, show grid. Now my grid will probably look a little bit different than yours, but I want you to turn yours to look like mine. And if I zoom in here, you can see that's what the grid, I don't know why this keeps happening. This is what the grid looks like. So let's change it around to make sure that it is the proper dimensions and that it's sitting in the proper place. So for this, we're going to want to go to Edit, Preferences. Now if you're on the Mac side, and I don't think too many of you are, that will be under your Illustrator icon. You'll click it and go to Preferences. So here we are, Preferences, and you guessed it, Guides and Grid. Don't worry about guides. You can play around with these later, but really what we need to set are grids. You can change your grid color at any time. I change mine to red because I can see it a bit better. Light gray is difficult for me to see. Depending on whatever artwork you're going to choose to trace on or build upon on top of, you're going to want to choose a contrasting color. So for me, red works pretty good. The most important thing is that you have lines selected. You could choose dots, but I really think that lines are better. Here's what's important. Grid line at every 9 points. Make sure that you have 9 points in here. Make sure that you have subdivisions of 8. That's going to give you the squares that you see here with 8 rows and 8 columns. 8 times 8 is 64, so you have 64 squares per every grid unit. That should give you enough detail for these fairly simple illustrations. I also deselected grids in back. I can explain what this is later individually, but if you have this selected, when you place a document on there, you won't see your grids on top of it. And for me, that is not good. So this looks good. I'll go ahead and choose OK. And here we go. Now, if I was to make a shape, and I'm going to fill this with a bright cyan so we can all see it, and use my shape tool, and let's zoom in here so I can really show you what's about to happen. If I click, hold, and drag, check this out. That shape doesn't really snap to the edges of the grid, which is exactly what I want. That's going to keep a nice uniform proportion for each unit. Call them pixels, call them squares, whatever you want to. Right now I'm not getting that. And if you have to kind of nudge it, that's going to be very problematic. It's going to take a long time, and it's just not going to look right. You can see that it's almost impossible to nail that. But there's a really easy fix for this. Just delete that out. Go to View and choose Snap to Grid. Once you have this enabled, take a look at what happens. When I click, hold, and drag, Illustrator automatically wants to hug onto those squares. As soon as you have this set up correctly, the rest is kind of a breeze. It's really just a matter of tracing things out. So if I was to find, say, an image of a banana, or I'll do a heart. I'll start with a very simple heart here. Copy this, paste it into Illustrator. Okay, it's big. It's actually not that big. It's just my work area is really small is what it is. Scale this down so it fits. And now, coincidentally, I've got a red shape on red guidelines. Very difficult for me to see. So I'm going to change those grid colors. So that's under Edit, Preferences, Guides and Grids. Change red to what resonates well against it, cyan, I think. Take a look if I do grids in back, what happens. I choose OK. Now the heart sits on top of the grids. It's going to make things twice as hard for me. So I'm going to make sure that I have my grids not set to behind. Deselect that grids in back. OK. See the grids right on top? Now it's just a matter of tracing. I think it's a great idea to create a new layer and lock your drawing down or your image down. So now when you get your rectangle tool and I don't want strokes. I'm just going to work with fills, and I'm just going to click, hold, and drag and start to make my shape. The biggest problem that students run into are the edges. Guys, you're not going to get rounded edges, and that's part of the charm of this. So your edges are going to be squared off. So you're going to have to kind of pick where the majority of the image falls and kind of decide, does a square belong here, or should I really kind of work on a new shape here? So I'll say right here, maybe right here. Some of this area is going to be very easy to fill in. The problem is, depending on where my next shape is, I might lose where the shadows and the highlights will be applied. So I like to kind of go individually and say, all right, this looks pretty good, but for here, I'm going to go ahead and start to fill in maybe more of the interior. Now, of course, I don't want this to be a blue heart. I mean, you can if you want. Choose alternate colors. Color representation isn't the most important thing, though if you are trying to make a banana, I would say yellow makes a lot of sense. Didn't quite get this one, so I'm just going to do a little bit more, and then I'll wrap this up, and then I'll finish up in part 2. So where does the next piece begin? Well, maybe it's up here. One thing that's a little bit annoying is I would like to have things deselected. I'm sure there's a hotkey for that, because every time I do this, it wants to immediately create a new shape, which sometimes works, other times it doesn't. These I can probably go all the way across, and then they start to go maybe back down right around in here. As for the shadows and highlights, it's up to you to kind of pick where they're at and what they look like. So maybe these right in here will be more of my interior shapes. I'll change those to a dark red, or in spirit of the demo so you can see, I'll change those to a darker. And then on the left hand side, this will be my highlights. So maybe around here, it's somewhere in between those colors. I could even, if I wanted to, say cancel this, change that to a little bit of a lighter color. Or maybe my color mixer might be a little bit better for this. Oh, that's a stroke. Don't want the stroke. Make sure that the fill is in focus. And then I could use my color guide to say it's going to be a little bit lighter. And then these are also going to be a little bit lighter. These, and you can see that sometimes you might need to modify a little bit. These will be a little bit lighter. This one's going to be the lightest. Something like that. You can already kind of see where this is going. I'll turn that background image off. And to hide the grids and hide the guides is Control and quote marks right above the apostrophe. And you can check your work this way. So you will toggle on and off your image quite a bit and your grids with Control apostrophe. And that's it. 4 separate images, thematic. Make sure that you have your grid set up correctly. I'll double check your work. Show me in class to see if it's working correctly. Good luck with it, and let me know if you have any questions.